Imagine, if you will, playing in a giant's garden every afternoon. A garden so vast and verdant, it could only belong to a creature of extraordinary size. This was the daily reality for a gaggle of children, fresh from the rigors of school, seeking solace and joy in the soft green grass of the giant's garden. This was no ordinary garden. It was a paradise of color and life, dotted with beautiful flowers that shone like stars against the green canvas. 12 peach trees stood tall, breaking out into delicate pink and pearl blossoms in spring, and offering rich, juicy fruit come autumn. The birds that nested in these trees sang melodies so sweet the children would pause their games, captivated by the symphony of nature. The children reveled in their happiness, sharing their joy with each other. However, one day, the owner of the garden returned. The giant, who had been away visiting his friend, the Cornish ogre, for 7 long years, arrived to find the children at play in his garden. His voice, gruff and intimidating, echoed through the garden, causing the children to scatter. He declared his garden his own, a sanctuary for him and him alone. In a display of his selfishness, the giant erected a high wall around the garden, bearing a stern warning to potential trespassers. The children, left without their beloved play area, were relegated to the dusty, stone-filled road. It was a poor substitute for the lush garden they were used to. Their lessons done, the children would wander around the forbidding wall, reminiscing about the beautiful garden that lay just beyond their reach. They would recall the joy they had experienced there, the memories they had created, and the happiness that was now a distant dream. In the end, the giant's selfishness had not only deprived the children of a place to play, but also of a piece of their happiness. It's a poignant reminder that the joy we derive from sharing far outweighs the fleeting satisfaction of selfishness. This tale serves as a parable, teaching us that while it's tempting to hold on to what we believe is ours, true happiness and fulfillment come from sharing and coexisting. The giant's garden was a haven of joy and beauty, but his inability to share it led to isolation and loneliness. In life, just like in our story, the walls we build not only keep others out, but they also confine us within. The giant's garden, once a place of joy and laughter, became a symbol of exclusion and selfishness. So as we navigate through our own gardens, let's remember to keep our gates open, to share our blossoms, our fruit, and our songs. For a garden is at its most beautiful when it's filled with laughter, shared joy, and the collective memories of those we allow in.
Why did spring never grace the garden of the giant? What made the birds cease their songs and the flowers recoil into the earth in this particular garden? A tale unfolds, a story of a selfish giant whose garden was forever trapped in a chilly winter, a place where the vibrant colors of spring dared not bloom. In the giant's garden, while the rest of the country celebrated the arrival of spring, winter stubbornly clung on. The birds, finding no joy in the barren, frosty landscape, chose not to sing. Even the audacious flowers that dared to peek from the grass, upon seeing the notice board, retreated into the ground, their petals curling in sorrow for the absent children, who rejoiced in this icy spectacle. Only the snow and the frost, declaring spring has forgotten this garden, so we will live here all the year round. The snow blanketed the grass with her chilly white cloak, while the frost adorned the trees in shimmering silver. They invited the north wind, who roared and rampaged throughout the garden, toppling chimney pots in his wake. To complete their icy quartet, they called upon the hail. For 3 hours every day, he would unleash a torrent upon the castle roof, breaking most of the slates, and then race around the garden, leaving a trail of ice in his wake. Mystified by the persistent cold, the selfish giant pondered, "I cannot understand why the spring is so late in coming. I hope there will be a change in the weather." But neither spring nor summer came. Autumn, too, turned her back on the giant's garden, bestowing golden fruit upon every garden but his. "He is too selfish," she declared, leaving the giant's garden to the endless dance of winter, the north wind, the hail, the frost, and the snow. Then, one morning, the giant awoke to the sound of a sweet melody. Believing it to be the king's musicians, he was delighted. In reality, it was a small linnet singing outside his window. Starved of such beautiful sounds, the giant deemed it the most exquisite music in the world. As he listened, the hail ceased its dance, and the north wind silenced its roar. A delicious perfume wafted through the open casement, prompting the giant to exclaim, "I believe the spring has come at last." This tale paints a vivid picture of how our actions and behaviors can impact the world around us. The giant's selfishness led to an eternal winter in his garden, devoid of the warmth and joy of spring. Only when he began to appreciate the beauty of life, symbolized by the song of the linnet, did spring dare to return. The moral of this story serves as a gentle reminder. Selfishness isolates us, but kindness and appreciation can bring back the warmth of spring into our lives.
Imagine, if you would, a sight most extraordinary. A hidden spectacle tucked away behind a tiny aperture in an imposing wall. What you'd find there would take your breath away. Children, their laughter ringing through the air, nestled comfortably in the branches of the trees. Each tree cradling a tiny occupant, their branches swaying gently as if to rock the children to sleep. The very trees seemed to rejoice in the children's presence, adorning themselves in a riot of blossoms. The air was filled with the joyous chirping of birds, flitting about in pure delight. The flowers too seemed to join the merriment, peeking through the verdant carpet of grass with a cheery smile. It was a vision of perfect harmony, a symphony of life in full bloom. But wait, there was a discord in this melody, a corner where winter still held its icy reign. In this forgotten corner stood a solitary figure, a little boy. He was so small, so tiny, that the branches of the frost-covered tree were out of his reach. He wandered around the tree, his sobs echoing in the otherwise jubilant garden. The tree, burdened with snow and buffeted by the harsh north wind, tried to comfort the child. "Climb up, little boy," it seemed to whisper, bending its branches as low as it could. But alas, the boy was too small. The heart of the giant, who had been observing this, melted at the sight. "How selfish I have been," he exclaimed. A wave of regret washed over him as he realized the reason spring had forsaken his garden. Determined to rectify his mistake, he resolved to help the little boy and transform his garden into a playground for the children. Forever, moving as quietly as he could, the giant descended the stairs, gently opening the front door and stepping out into the garden. But alas, his sudden appearance frightened the children, who fled, leaving the garden to once again succumb to winter's grasp. All but the little boy, who was too preoccupied with his tears to notice the giant's approach. With a gentleness that belied his size, the giant lifted the boy and placed him atop the tree. As if by magic, the tree burst into blossoms, attracting birds that filled the air with their beautiful song. Overjoyed, the boy flung his arms around the giant, planting a sweet kiss on his cheek. Seeing this, the other children returned, bringing spring and its vibrant colors back with them. The giant, his heart full of joy, declared, "This garden is yours now, little children." And with that, he swung his great axe, bringing down the imposing wall that had once kept the children out. When the townsfolk were heading to the market at noon, they were greeted by the sight of the giant, playing with the children in the most beautiful garden they had ever laid their eyes on. And so we learn, my friends, that the power of kindness and selflessness can bring about the most beautiful transformations. That no wall is too high, no winter too long, for the warmth of love and happiness to penetrate. And most importantly, that a garden is at its most beautiful, not when it's filled with flowers and trees, but when it echoes with the laughter of...
Have you ever wondered about the bond between a giant and a little boy? This is not just any story, but one filled with emotion, friendship, and a touch of magic. In a world where giants and children played together, there was one giant who was particularly fond of a certain little boy. This little boy was unique, unlike the others, for he had given the giant a kiss, a token of affection the giant held dear. One day, as the sun began its descent, the children came to bid the giant farewell. But the little boy was nowhere in sight. The giant asked about his favorite friend, but all the children could say was that he had disappeared, vanished without a trace. The giant felt a pang of sadness, an emptiness that filled his heart. In the days that followed, the children continued to play with the giant, keeping him company, trying to fill the void left by the little boy. But despite their cheerful laughter and endless games, the giant yearned for his first little friend. He often found himself whispering, "How I would like to see him." As the years passed, the giant, now old and frail, could no longer join the children in their play. He spent his days sitting in a massive armchair, watching the children, admiring his garden. "I have many beautiful flowers," he mused, "but the children are the most beautiful flowers of all." One winter morning, as he gazed out of his window, he saw a sight that left him astounded. In the farthest corner of his garden, a tree bloomed with beautiful white blossoms. Its branches were golden, and silver fruit hung down from them. And beneath this enchanting tree stood the little boy he had loved. Overwhelmed with joy, the giant hurried into the garden. He ran across the grass, his heart pounding with anticipation. But as he neared the child, his joy turned to anger. "Who hath dared to wound thee?" he demanded. For on the palms of the child's hands and on his little feet were the prints of 2 nails. This tale of the giant and the little boy is one of friendship, loss, longing, and reunion. It teaches us about the power of connection, the pain of separation, and the joy of reuniting with those we love. Despite the years and the distance, the giant's love for the little boy remained, and in the end, they were reunited in the most magical way. The bond they shared was not just an ordinary one, but a bond that transcended time, a bond that was truly special.
In the heart of a forgotten kingdom, a solitary giant lived in a grand, sprawling garden. For many a year, the giant had kept this garden all to himself, forbidding the village children from playing amidst its vibrant flowers and towering trees. One day, a small, delicate child managed to slip past the garden's iron gates. The giant, initially furious, was soon moved by the child's innocence and allowed him to stay. The child's laughter filled the air, and the once silent garden bloomed like never before. As days turned into weeks, the giant found himself growing fond of the child. However, one day, the child did not arrive. The giant, consumed by worry, was relieved when he finally saw the child again, but the child was not his usual self. He seemed quieter, his laughter subdued. Upon his palm lay 2 deep wounds. "Who has dared to wound thee?" asked the giant, ready to wield his mighty sword in vengeance. But the child simply shook his head and responded, "But these are the wounds of love." The giant, taken aback, knelt before the small child, a sense of awe washing over him. "Who art thou?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. The child smiled, his eyes twinkling with an otherworldly light. "You let me play once in your garden. Today you shall come with me to my garden, which is paradise." When the village children returned that afternoon, they found the giant lying peacefully under the tree, covered in a blanket of white blossoms. The giant was no more. Yet his garden bloomed brighter than ever, a testament to his transformation from a selfish recluse to a being capable of love, compassion, and sacrifice. And so the story of the selfless giant and the child of love unfolds, reminding us of the transformative power of love. It teaches us that love, in its purest form, can soften the hardest hearts and heal the deepest wounds. The wounds of love are not inflicted by malice, but are a testament to our capacity to care, to feel, and ultimately to love. So the next time you find yourself bearing the wounds of love, remember the tale of the giant and the child. Embrace these wounds, not as marks of suffering, but as badges of honor, signifying your ability to love and be loved in return. And as we close this chapter, keep in mind that every garden, every heart has the potential to become a paradise, if only we let love.